Welcome to this edition of Labor Vision. I'm Bob Delaney, Executive Director of the Institute for Labor Studies and Research. Labor Vision, a production of the Institute, focuses on topics of importance to working Rhode Islanders. We hope you enjoy this edition.
Hello, you're watching Labor Vision, the at-home edition. I'm your host, Autumn Guillotte, and continuing with our series on ARPA spending in Rhode Island, I have Jim Parisi and Frank Flynn from the Rhode Island AFT. The American Rescue Plan, or ARPA, was signed into law on March 11, 2021 by President Biden. This act is a way for the federal government to aid state and municipal governments coping with the fallout from the COVID-19 pandemic. Rhode Island's share of these dollars includes $1.13 billion for state fiscal relief and $540 million for local fiscal relief and $415 million for relief specifically for K through 12 schools. On August 4th, 2021, the Rhode Island AFL-CIO convened a gathering of labor leaders from across the state to discuss how we should best spend this money to help working class Rhode Islanders. Based off these discussions, several recommendations were made, including 6 key proposals to talk about education. So I'm really glad to have Jim and Frank here to talk about some of those recommendations. So welcome.
Thanks for having us, Autumn.
Yeah, we're thrilled to be here.
Cool. So I just want to give a picture of what it was like at the start of the pandemic and as the years continued. And I can't believe we're like 2 years into this now. What it was like for your members during the height of the pandemic.
I'll begin. As you recall, it was March 13th, Friday the 13th, actually, that our worlds changed dramatically. Everyone was notified that all schools would be shut down the following week, and that would become teachers' quote unquote April vacation, and that they would have a week of planning to do to begin schooling the following Monday. So they had a week to all of a sudden learn a new way to implement all of the teaching and learning that traditionally happened in brick and mortar public schools. There was a host of activities around training to try to get people up to speed with respect to how to teach virtually. We didn't have broadband in a lot of places. We had to figure out how to get materials to people. Districts had to figure out how to get lunches to students. It was really a pandemonium for that first week. But I have to say, I could never be more proud of the way that our employees, our teachers, our school staff, and our other public employees responded to this change in education. And they did an unbelievable job learning, asynchronous as well as synchronous teaching and different, hybrid models, and just, developing curricula that would be effective virtually. And it was just a phenomenal outpouring. Everyone bonded together in the districts and did, like I said, just an amazing job of trying to do the best they could under very difficult conditions. And I think, while there was certainly a lot of bumps along the way, they did finish that school year, and there was a lot of learning going on. And we had the summer of 2020 to plan the reopening of schools, and it was delayed, but we were in a better position because of all the work that was done in the spring of 2020.
I think that one of the biggest challenges during the pandemic was classroom teachers dealing with students in front of them with another group on the computer. And every time there's an exposure, certain groups of students were quarantined and away, so there was just a lot of student mobility and a lot of real challenges, for getting the day-to-day work done. And teachers did a great job of making it work but it's not optimal. And all teachers prefer, in person, but know that there's health risks involved. And of course, we have a wide variety of folks with, real concerns about the health and safety of students as well as the staff. So those are some of the challenges. And then we represent some non-classroom teachers, some of whom, such as the visiting nurses and the group home workers at Trudeau, who worked in person every day, the early challenges about PPE evolving into real staffing challenges as the whole labor market changed have continued to be efforts that we've dealt with. And then finally, we represent lots of folks in higher education, and they did an amazing turnaround in going from in-person to virtual instruction and getting some people who weren't necessarily tech savvy to get tech savvy in a short period of time and make it work for the students at the Rhode Island College and the other institutions. It was great work all around.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, Jim, I think it's also important to point out our folks that work in the DD community and in the group homes, and they were really truly heroes. They were, in a congregate setting like that, they were often exposed. Many contracted COVID, and they were short-staffed in many cases, so they had to work extra shifts, and they did a remarkable job of caring for some of our most vulnerable citizens in the state and making sure they had an environment where they was as safe as possible.
yeah, I think I would hope that people recognized how important the workers are who take care of our loved ones, but I know that the pandemic made that all the more clear when you're talking about either people who provide care for in like health or in elder care, but also with teachers who working parents rely on not only to teach their kids, but to make sure their kids are in one place and safe while they're at work all day. I mean, I know that the hybrid model was especially important to parents adjusting to a new labor market where my mom is a work school teacher, and she had kids who were doing school from home while she had kids in front of her simply because they couldn't get a ride to school because their parents' work schedules had changed. And the bus schedule hadn't caught up yet to what they needed. So it is nice to see this sort of community coming together to try and figure out how to take care of our kids and how to support our teachers. And we're hoping to do a little bit more of that, right, with some of these ARPA recommendations.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think you raise a very good point. The teachers, we commented what a great job the teachers and employees did, but also there was tremendous strain on the parents. Many of them had to work from home while their children were home, and they tried to supervise them and work with them while they were also dealing with their own professional responsibilities. So it was pretty stressful for them as well. And the overwhelming number of them did a phenomenal job as well, supporting the children in the schools to make this as successful as it could have been.
Completely. So now that we're mostly in person, I know that some schools have to go distance learning or DL every now and then, and I believe that up until Christmas, some other schools are just deciding not to be in the building. There's some recommendations that we have with this new federal windfall to make in-person learning a little bit better. The first one I see is that the state should provide funding to deploy a community school coordinator in each public school in Rhode Island. So what's a community school coordinator?
So we have the Community Schools Initiative has been going on throughout the country in many states, and it's a great concept. And AFT National has been really promoting it. We have 3 community schools in Rhode Island in our Pawtucket district, and basically what it is we hire a coordinator in every school because we know that principals are overwhelmed in many cases with all of the responsibilities they have, just being the educational leader in the building, managing the building, and now with all the additional responsibilities related to COVID and coordinating that and isolating students and quarantining and making sure their staffs are safe, and students are safe. So they're overwhelmed with the amount of responsibility. So they couldn't, it wouldn't be reasonable or responsible to ask them to undertake a whole other level of responsibility. But so we need a person in the building that could coordinate this community schools model. There are 4 pillars that community schools are built on: integrating community supports, expanding and enriching learning time and opportunities, active family and community engagement, and collaborative leadership. So what's happened in Pawtucket is they hire a community school coordinator who works very closely under the direction and collaboratively with the principal to come up with all of these different ideas and programs that support the students both in the classroom and within the community. And we engage parents, bring parents in for a number of different activities. And we've done things such as a walking school bus, because one of the big issues we had was student attendance. And one of the reasons a student can't be successful if they're not in school, and many times the on time. So they have some of the schools, they have a walking school bus where they have staff members walk a route every morning and stop by each house for students that live in that neighborhood and walk them to school. And the kids look forward to that. It motivates them. And we've seen a spike in student achievement based on the spike in student attendance. So we that's just one facet of how community schools can benefit a district and the school. So we think that this is a great model. We've seen much success early on in Pawtucket, but like everything else, it requires a significant number of resources, and specifically, it can't be successful without a dedicated coordinator. So we're trying to make sure we have the seed money to expand that into any district or community or school that would like it.
We've already promoted legislation to get state money for community schools coordinators. Senator Cano from Pawtucket has put that bill in, and we're focused on that. But 8 states have already made a decision to use their federal money for a community schools initiative, and we hope Rhode Island jumps in. A little bit of money up front creates these programs that integrates community with their local public schools in a real positive way. And it would be a great way to improve public education and benefit students directly if we could provide more integrated services at the school level.
Totally. I mean, there's so much that goes into student success. The community is another aspect. And then I see there's another recommendation to use some of this funding to expand the existing program for schools to hire school resource officers, which would include mental health workers and social workers. So that's pretty exciting.
So a couple of years ago, the General Assembly provided some money, not a permanent commitment to fund these jobs, but give schools money for a couple of years to hire school resource officers, and we supported that, and we support the continued existence of that categorical source of state money for our schools. But there's a real need to expand services, hire more social workers and guidance counselors and school psychologists. So we would love to see some of the federal money being dedicated towards helping schools hire these service providers in the public schoolhouse, because it has an immediate direct relationship with all of the trauma and difficulty students have had dealing with the pandemic the last 2 years. We really need more resources in the schools to help with the social and emotional well-being of students, and having a pot of money that the state could help districts by hiring people would be a great use of federal money.
Totally. I mean, not just the pandemic, but being a teenager is stressful, right? Like just walking through the world and balancing education and family. So I could see how that could help students quite a bit be academically successful. There's so many recommendations to cover, but another interesting one is your school-based pre-K education to make it publicly accessible. I was wondering if you could speak a little bit to that.
Sure. So we've had over the past several years, we now have all day K in every single one of our schools. So the next initiative was expanding our pre-K opportunities. We have both in district pre-K classrooms as well as private pre-K classrooms throughout the state. We think it's a natural expansion of our school system, but they need additional resources in order to make that come to fruition. And so we were looking to expand that opportunity. And it's not just an investment in the classroom and funding for hiring the teachers, but there's a number of costs related. In addition to personnel costs, there's a number of logistical costs that they have to do, creating space, renovating and fixing buildings, providing material. So it's in many places they're starting anew. So we need to make sure, and there are a number of regulations around the space that has to be utilized to make it appropriate for students of that age. So it's a win-win. We think that ultimately there will be universal pre-K at some point. We hope that happens for those parents that want it. Some parents don't want to send their kids, but we think that if we can get it and expand it, it would certainly go a long way to eliminating the need for a lot of remedial costs later on in the student's life if we get an early start. And particularly, we're targeting underserved populations in some of our inner city areas where students may really benefit from early pre-K education.
Totally. I mean, and you spoke a little bit too about building an infrastructure. There's also another recommendation to make a down payment and support a bond measure on the 2022 ballot to build new and retrofit existing school buildings to make them carbon free by the year 2030, which would also align with the Act on Climate that passed this past year. So it would be great to see this kind of investment in our education.
Oh yeah, it's tremendous. I mean, we're the fourth year into this initiative to rebuild our schools. We know that the average age of a school building in Rhode Island is over 60 years old. Some of them are close to 100 years old, and they all need many schools in every district in the state. This isn't just an urban problem. This is a problem everywhere. We realized they needed a tremendous amount of resources in order to rebuild them and modernize them. And this began, as I said, approximately 4 years ago after the Jacobs report was issued to make all schools warm, safe, and dry. But now we've even expanded that initiative to look at, we saw during the pandemic the difficulty we had with air quality, and we had an airborne virus that in many of our schools were not situated to deal with that with the proper ventilation. We had these heating systems and ventilation systems that were antiquated. So now, we're incorporating the new Green Schools initiative into these so that we can reduce our carbon footprint by retrofitting and remodeling our buildings, by making them more energy efficient so we can save money in that regard. And, it's a win-win, and it doesn't make sense not to incorporate the new Green School initiative into our current remodelization and remediation program for schools. So we're really excited about that. We're working with it's a coalition that we were instrumental in starting early on, and now we're working with a number of environmental groups and the building trades groups, because we want, of course, to be able to create good labor, middle-class labor jobs for our citizens in Rhode Island, and this is a win-win for everyone.
I think the pandemic really highlighted the importance of good ventilation systems that work, clean air, clean water, and providing that in a school environment is just critically important. And state investment of federal money along those lines is perfectly aligned with the reason why we have this rescue plan money in the first place.
Totally. We had Climate Jobs Rhode Island on Labor Vision a couple months ago, and they started to speak about this, especially because you could say, oh, just open the window to get better air in. But first of all, in the winter, and if anyone's experienced in New England winter, opening the window is not always the best move. But you also have in areas where there's a lot of air pollution, opening the window doesn't necessarily mean bringing fresh air into the room. And we have very high asthma rates for children in the Providence and urban core. So upgrading and retrofitting these buildings would go a long way for the health and safety of our kids. I mean, that's kind of like the name of the game here with these recommendations. I also see a call to provide funding for local school departments to make school-based meals, both breakfast and lunch, freely available to all students. So that would be amazing, I think.
So we've seen some expansion of school districts providing breakfast programs, in the school building, and we've always had a lunch with subsidized lunch or free lunch for some students, but we don't think it would take a lot of resources for all public schools to provide everyone who walks in the door both breakfast and lunch. It would enhance student nutrition, obviously, but it would help build the community by having everyone in the same lunch program, in a school and not segregating one group of students against another. So we think it's a good use of resources, and it also avoids, what some have decried as lunch shaming, where, students, particularly those whose parents don't pay their bill, are given a different lunch than other students. So, having everyone in the same kind of food program, if you will, both breakfast and lunch in our public school buildings, we think is a great initiative that could be funded by this federal money.
Yeah, in the wealthiest country in the world, we shouldn't have a single day go by where a child misses a meal in school. It's absurd with the waste that we have, that this isn't a priority for everyone.
And I'm sure a lot of parents would appreciate knowing their kids could have food if they don't have time to pack lunch. It's time economy, and it's real economy for a lot of families, I think. That's great. I think there's just one more. I'm just looking at, we have a beautiful PDF of recommendations available on the AFL website. If anyone wants to go and look at all 26, we're just covering the education ones right now. The last one I see is to support the 2021 school bus driver law, providing funding for that to guarantee drivers 180 paid school days while establishing a prevailing wage for the industry in the state.
So we had in this, we would again like to see it expanded just beyond school bus drivers. We have a number of hourly employees that work in a school district, and it's incumbent on us to protect them when people had to go virtual. We want to make sure that they're guaranteed income if they don't have to make up school days anymore. For example, we have a new policy on virtual snow days. And we don't want anyone to lose money because of something that's beyond their own control. So if they're a 180-day employee and schools shift to a virtual platform for a day or a week, we want to make sure that those people have opportunities to retain that income, and bus drivers or anyone else for that matter.
Totally. I mean, we talk a lot about getting kids to school and helping them stay there and helping them feel warm and safe and happy in the building. So I think that this is some of the best ways to spend this federal money in the state. So I really appreciate both of you coming on the show to explain some of these recommendations. As I said before, they are available online on the Rhode Island AFL website. I'll put a link in the show notes so that you can see. They're also all over the AFL and Labor Vision social media. You can like and subscribe to our channel on YouTube, and you can always find our archive of videos on laborvisionri.org. So thank you both so much again for coming.
Thank you, Autumn.
Thanks for having us.
All right, bye-bye.
Thank you for joining us for this edition of Labor Vision. We appreciate your input and encourage your comments. Labor Vision can be seen on this channel 3 times each week: Tuesday at 7 p.m., Thursday at 8 p.m., and Saturday at 5 p.m.